we go! Episode 16 of The Drop in the house! Coming in hot, MK.
Yes,
on
we are.
Friday, August 14th. We are an unusual 1 hour earlier than normal because of our special guest today, and we will get to her in a minute. MK, I am so excited.
I know.
For this week's
is a good
episode. Oh my goodness, the work is just
unreal.
The pre-check last week, getting to know our artist, was even more exciting just to get to talk to her. And a lot of big news coming in this week, MK, about schools and reopening.
Yeah.
We've
a lot
been,
of news.
Yeah, our heads have been swimming. Just all kinds of things to cover, and things that haven't been addressed, and protocols and how things are going to work. And we're only 3 weeks out. And some things still, we're not sure how we're going to go about getting this done and what it's going to look like. And I have some trepidation, MK. I thought going in, I'd be like, I'll be Sena.
Yeah,
I'll be okay, like always. But I don't know, man. I'm starting to feel a little bit.
I was like the other day. I'm like, we'll go in the first day and we'll figure it out. But now I'm like, I don't know. With all these plans that they have, I'm terrified going into this year. My going back to school dreams and nightmares have already started.
Yes,
as teachers, you always get those dreams in the middle of the summer where you're like in a class and like you're like 20 minutes late for it, or you have kids that are like just the worst kids in the school all in one class. So I had those nightmares really, really early. So
those anxiety dreams have started in my bedroom, in my head too.
And now it's like they've changed, where I'm in the class and I'm like in a classroom full of kids with no masks, or they're knocking down the plexiglass dividers in between the kids. It's gonna be a scary one. I don't know. I'm already counting down 180 more days to go.
I know. It's like,
it's horrible.
The old joke is that August is one long Sunday night for teachers.
It is
like, oh my goodness, like those Sunday night blues have been happening since August 1st. It's like, geez, I think they've been quantified even more with what's coming down the pipe. So
100%, 100%, yeah.
But the good news is that we have a lot to talk about in terms of art today. Our favorite.
Yes, we do.
And an artist who is so unbelievably technically skilled. I think, MK, this is the first hyper-realist painter we've had on the program.
Yeah.
And personally, for myself, the subject matter, knowing that, you can see behind me that I do enjoy painting tattooed skin and figures, and this artist just blows that out of the water with her technical ability. In fact, we mentioned her on the second episode with our buddy Frank Aridi, when I had said that when I look at artists who influenced me about painting tattooed skin, Frank is one, and our artist is, on today is right up there with him. And it's just, every time I see another piece of hers, I come down and look at mine and just shake my head. And I'm like, I'm just not there. I'm just not there yet. Puts me such to shame. Jackee Sandelands-Strom is with us today, all the way from Edinburgh, Scotland, which is why we have our time difference a little bit different today. We wanted to make sure that we didn't keep her burning the midnight oil over there just for us. She is sitting in the tattoo studio that she owns with her husband over in Edinburgh, Scotland. And I just want to say right off the bat, Jackee, thank you for joining us. I am so excited to talk process with you and hear about your background and your influences. I think we're going to have a great conversation, especially for the kids who are going to be listening in. But if you could, the other thing is, and I'm gonna preface it by saying it, MK, my affinity for accents. And how much I love a good accent. And we find that Jackee lives in Scotland. I'm like, there's going to be a brogue. It's going to be fantastic. And we meet with her on the pre-check last week, and she sounds like my Aunt Janine Shelley from Traverse City, Michigan.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm ashamed of it all the time.
But the reason being is because Jackee is originally from Minnesota. So, Jackee, if you could just start from growing up, what was it like for you growing up in Minnesota, and when did you find art, and when did it become so important for you?
I mean, it was always important. I was one of those kids that just started painting and drawing right from the beginning of when I can remember, at least. And I remember getting my first set of watercolors, and actually it's such a privileged sounding story too, because I actually grew up, part of like the earlier years were in England because my father was British and my mom was from Minnesota. So when we lived here, it was very easy to go vacation in places like France and Germany and whatever. And I got my first watercolor set when we were camping in France, and got to sit there and like plein air paint essentially as like a 7 or 6-year-old.
Wow.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's a odd memory, which I've been told. For me, that sounds normal, but then other people,
Which is a beautiful thing. If that's a normal memory for you, then that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. So, I mean, but that's how long I've been painting, and it was all realistic stuff. I mean, my life was, back then it was like horses and trees. So many horses and trees all the time. And the first thing I painted on with watercolor was these like canvas boards that my grandma had bought me. So complete inappropriate use, but
That's okay. Experimentation is the key, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then from there, it just went to like, we moved to America when I was preteen, and obviously spent most of my time there, as you can tell by my non-Scottish accent. And I mean, just started painting all the time when I was in high school, doing murals on my bedroom wall, whatever I could do. And yeah.
What was the program that you were in high school like? Was it really intensive? Did you kind of not really feel what the program was offering you? How did that all work for you as a kid?
Well, I mean, in high school, like I graduated in 1994 from an academic type of school. It was not arts forward by any means. If anything, it was like a refuge for a lot of odd kids. And so I can't say there was any like specific structure that I remember from. I mean, it was just learning anything and everything. And yeah, I mean,
in high school now,
to try to remember.
But was there a feeling in high school that this was something that you thought career-wise, like this might be something you want to pursue?
It did. I don't think that with my upbringing, I ever considered like fine arts to be something that I could pursue as a career idea. I mean, my family, like none of them were artists at all, very like professional, and kind of expected to have the same sort of life for their children and studies for their children. Not that they didn't encourage my art and everything, but it just like coming from a family like that, they might not be able to help guide to see what kind of careers can come out of an artistic personality. So my first thing was when I got my first tattoo, I discovered then that I wanted to be a tattooer. And at 18, I started apprenticing at a place in Stillwater, Minnesota, and trying to pursue the arts through that, and eventually tattooed on and off for a number of years, but it wasn't as satisfying as I expected it to be for what I needed to do with the arts anyways.
Right. That's interesting. That's interesting. That's, you know, I'm friends with a lot of tattoo artists, and I know a lot of their backstories, and it always seems to be the reverse, that a lot of them go away to art school and are fine art majors or illustration majors, and then they find their way into the tattoo world. But with you, it sounds like it's the reverse. You started off in the tattoo world and you were like, I need something a little bit more intense or something more academic. And so what happens? Do you decide then to go to college for art?
No, I've never been to college for art. I decided that I just needed to experiment a lot more to find out what my medium was going to end up being. And I'm kind of an anxious person, and the like tattooing is a pretty like anxiety causing
I would think
pain.
so.
Because
Especially
it's
starting out, I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you make a mistake. Like, I would
Right.
hate to run into people in Stillwater, Minnesota that I had my hands on 20 years ago. Like, I don't want to see any of that. So eventually I just, I think for my own comfort, I moved away from that. But I also, after that, I had a child when I was young, and she's now 24 years old. So I was busy raising my child and then trying to do that with, like in the tattoo industry back then, you worked 1 to 9, like every day except Sundays.
Yeah.
So just because of circumstances, I ended up having to move on and then figuring out how to get my art. Once I figured out what my art was, I had
Right.
to figure out how to get it out there and pursue it in
Right.
a different way.
Is there an aha moment in regards to that you can remember where it was like, oh, this is the art I should be doing?
There is, when I first moved away from America in 2014, which sounds like way too late in life to have an aha moment, but that was it. Like, I moved away from everything I knew, and my husband and I were spending most days in our like apartment in this new place in a relatively small town in the Netherlands. Not Amsterdam by any means. Like, it was like almost a
And not
little
as
like,
and not as fun as Amsterdam, I'm assuming.
no, not as fun. It was a really sleepy, adorable town, but very, very sleepy area. And we had so much quiet time that it sort of lent itself to just painting all the time. And then, um, I mean, I don't know a lot of hyper realist painters, but for myself, uh, I can't say that I'm a super imaginative person. I love art. I love imaginative art. But when I try to come up with concepts, like sometimes I can see them, like, you know how you probably want to be able to pull off a Scottish accent right now, and you can hear it in your
Yes.
Oh,
head.
he
You
probably
can.
But if you
could.
said it out loud, it might not
It
sound
might
right.
not. It might not sound right.
He's very good with his accents, though.
Are
I
you?
could.
Yeah. He's got
I've watched a lot of Braveheart, so I can imitate
Oh,
Braveheart. But like that, I don't think that counts.
Let's hear it. I can be a really good judge.
I don't know how my throat's gonna sound like this through the microphone, but I could try it.
How's that? How do you
That's not bad,
Pretty
right?
good. It's
That's
not
pretty
bad at
good.
all. Way better than I could do, and I've been living here for like 3 years.
Well, let me
so
ask you,
4 years.
if I walked into the tattoo shop there in Edinburgh and I tried that accent, would I get jumped, or would I be like, no, that's a pretty legit dude?
We would all politely wait for you to turn around and look at each other like, what?
That's so funny.
That's good to know. So I'm not going to try that anytime soon when I travel.
Maybe not here. You might be able to get away with it there.
Oh,
but
I've done it
in Scotland.
Yes. In college, for sure, I pulled off quite a bit of chicanery with accents, but no.
That's
so
funny.
I find it, Jackee, I find it so fascinating describing how the hyper realist is more of your thing, because you have trouble being imaginative, but yet the tattoo industry is all about being imaginative. Like, you have to have somebody who comes in and says, oh, I want a dragon, with St. Michael on his back, and he's shooting dice. And you have to come up with something like that.
Right. Yeah, which, I mean, so back, like, the tattoo industry has changed a lot. Back in the 90s when I started, you walked into a tattoo shop and you pointed at the wall and you said, I want that.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was about as easy as it got. I mean, you did have some custom shops, but the custom shops were still doing like custom tribal or a custom dragon. And when you were doing that custom dragon, chances are you were staring at a picture on the wall of another dragon. And, you know, I mean, it was like, it's changed enormously. And the amount of talent out there in the tattoo industry now it's amazing. Like how quickly things have become what they are. I've tried and think I will keep trying to get back into tattooing again, but I think I'm going to come at it from a realism point. because of course now you can choose your own style for tattooing.
Yeah.
But like my husband, he's been tattooing for about 25 years and he's exceptionally talented, and his imagination, like when I watch somebody come in for an appointment with him and they tell him, you know, I mean, like the expression, it's usually like 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound sack. Heard that? And then he has to like make it work, and it blows my mind away. Like, I don't think that I'm capable of being able to do stuff like that. But that's why you see such admiration for the tattoo industry in my work. Like that's as much as I can show my appreciation for it, I guess.
Yeah, no, but it's with all the artists that I have talked to in the tattoo industry, and watching them work, whether it's on myself or on somebody else that I know, just the background that they have is so similar to an academic painter. Like there's shading, there's underpainting, there's tonal ranges, there's essentially like a glazing process of putting color over things. It's all really meshed together with the fine art world so much now, more so than, like you said, back then when you just pick flash off the wall. And you're like, all right, it's going to have 3 colors and you're done.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's turned into an absolute art. I think it should be much more respected at this point than it is by the fine arts world.
Right. Yeah.
But absolutely. I mean, it's nice, like at least now, you know, back when I first started getting tattooed, which is, you know, well over 20 years ago, you were looked at sideways all the time, especially being a woman and being fully tattooed was. So like now, you know, even though the TV shows are like, it's a blessing and a curse, as they say. Us rebels are no longer rebels. Like you can walk around and be.
It's almost now rebellious to not have any.
It is. I tell people that all the time. Like it really is odd to not have a tattoo, but.
Right. So we're talking about work, MK.
Yeah.
Can we start pulling up some of Jackee's stuff?
Sure.
Because Jackee, if you could just walk us through, I have so many questions about your process, your subject matter, your influence. But first thing I want to say is when you're looking at these pieces, if you're not familiar with Jackee's work and the hyper-realism that's involved, these are, and my first question is, because we know that your medium of choice is acrylic.
Yes.
And so to see someone pull this work off with acrylic, MK, it's even more mind-boggling for me personally.
Yeah, because I look at it, I thought it was oil, you know.
I thought for sure it was oil painted. So I'm going to ask you, Jackee, right off the bat, why acrylic as opposed to oil? What works best for you in that medium?
Well, I switched away from oil because I was working out of my house for so long, and the smell and the toxicity of it just didn't mesh with me well. It affected my skin and everything. So I really went to acrylic sort of out of necessity. And initially it was disappointing because I really used to dislike acrylic a lot because it is hard to work with. You know, it just like the how tacky it gets and how quickly it wants to dry before you can get anywhere with it, and the difficulty of blending and blah, 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 blah. It takes to surfaces differently. Like, you know, when using like a magenta and oil and a magenta and acrylic will kind of come out like after a little more than with the oil. Like there's such weird little things. But once I figured out a process with it, like the benefits I think are that, especially for doing the hyper-realism, I feel like I can always get a little bit crisper of an effect where I want it to be a little more crisp. I love oil. I mean, oil has a beautiful thing all to itself, and I enjoyed painting with it and the appeal of it. But yeah, acrylic can be a lot of fun once you get over the frustrating part of it.
Right. Now, let me ask you this, Jackee, with no technically formal training in it, how did you teach yourself? Because these mediums are not easy to learn when you are doing it on your own. I mean, are you looking up instruction videos? You reading books? How are you figuring things out?
See, my husband loves reading art books. So I make him give me the cliff notes on stuff that I feel like I should. Isn't that terrible?
You need that book
No,
report.
that's fantastic. That's awesome.
I'm a hands-on learner. So like a lot of it was buy acrylic paint and just start playing around with it. Like, I got all the mediums, everything I felt like I would need, and then just have at it. And going further back to when I first moved to the Netherlands and had suddenly a ton of time to sit around and do nothing but paint, it was all experimenting and trying to figure out how to work it. I ended up turning to wood panels because, like, now living overseas, anybody that really liked my work had a tendency to be in America, and I was worried about shipping canvas if somebody bought my work.
Right.
So really I went to wood panels again, kind of out of necessity. And once I started figuring out the combination of a wood panel with acrylic paint, I realized that they love each other. Like, there is so much more that you can do, or well, I can do at least when working on wood with it. And it sort of has a lot more, it reminded me a little more of working with oils.
Yeah. Now, Jackee, do you use specific, like, slow drying retardant type medium with acrylic, or it's all just straight out of the tube?
It's now just straight out of the tube with water. Because I was like, who needs to buy the medium? And I don't need it to slow dry anymore. So I just like, it's a lot more painstaking than you might imagine. Like, I almost never put down opaque layer of color. It's always like you can see through to what other colors are in the background.
And I was
which makes it look like oil painting, you know.
Right, like seeing those other colors come through.
So you're watering everything down and almost doing like a wash, technically?
Pretty much. Lots of washes, which is why it takes me a million hours to complete one.
But I find that it's just fascinating to connect the dots with what you said at the beginning of the program, how your start was in watercolor. And do you think now, hearing your process, that there is some subconscious link to that comfort of glazing these lighter values, kind of like a watercolor, like a wash system that suits what you need to do?
There could be. I mean, it's funny because, like, I really want to love watercolors themselves, and I cannot handle them.
It's the unpredictability of it.
I'm a control freak, and they're just too far out of my control. And
that's why a lot of people have trouble with watercolor.
So I think, like, watering down the acrylic does give me, I guess, that benefit of a watercolor, but with the benefit of being a control freak and needing to have it fit into a tidy little thing still.
But it just clicked, just hearing that, what you had said in the beginning, and then knowing that was your approach, because obviously MK and I can see the layering. That's very obvious how you can get those, especially with the ones that are lit, like the hands that you paint when there's like a green lighting around it, or, you know, something that has, like, it looks like it's been spot lit. You can see that. You can see that quality in them, but they're so tight, and they're so clean, and they're so photographic. MK, like I can't wrap my mind around how many layers have to be created to get to that point.
in the skin amazes me. Like,
there's so many layers.
The cracks and the dryness of the hands, and they're really
those are my favorite parts, the cracks and the dryness of the hands and the broken, dirty fingernails. Like, I love those. Like, the worse off the hand, the more
better
in life. That's the story, is it's in those fingers. Like, an old tattoo is so much more fun to paint than a new tattoo, and older skin is so much more fun than younger skin. Like, there's just so much texture and life.
And is the history to it.
Exactly.
It tells more of a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like these the little hairs down here.
Yeah, but they really are. They're narrative paintings. Like, you think they're very just like, oh, it's just this, they're just hands. They're just still life paintings of hands. But you are really telling stories about different people. Is that kind of the underlying theme of your work?
It's exactly it. I mean, I've been asked so many times why hands, and I fell into them on accident, sitting in the Netherlands, looking around my house, like, what can I paint? What can I paint? What can I paint? And then boom, I was like, oh, I could paint my hand. So I did. And then I did it again and again and again and again. And then fortunately I met people who could let me paint their hands. So it's not just a whole bunch of my hand. But it's like when people ask, my point to them is like, it's, what about people that do nothing but portraiture?
Right.
This is my portrait,
Right.
like there's as much story to be told, especially in a tattooed hand or an old hand or a grimy hand, whatever. There's so much to be told in that image, just like somebody's face. So
totally.
Does that narrative portion of it also carry over into, because in some of your work, in a lot of your work actually, they're holding an object. Does the choice of the object also play into the narrative of that hand?
It does. Quite often it plays into my own narrative that I make up for that hand. Like, I mean, because it might not necessarily be a whiskey drinker that I'm, painting with a whiskey glass, but I love whiskey. So I'm like, now you're going to look like you love whiskey too. Or if it's like a teacup, if I see a good grimy hand, I think the juxtaposition with a beautiful old teacup is so nice. So they might not typically have their tea in a nice dainty thing, but
I'm assuming you're working from people so you're taking the references yourself. You're photographing them, or you're working right from the hand?
I photograph them because I mean, these paintings take me a million years to do. So I take a ton. I'm just going to speak in huge numbers. I take a bazillion photos. And then I take a million years to paint them. So I take a ton of photos with different lighting scenarios. Sometimes it's people I know. Sometimes it's people I see on a street or I see in a pub. I mean, there's like one even where somebody from another tattoo shop called me and was like, oh my God, you've got to see this person's hands. So I zoomed over there with like
that's funny.
a teacup in my backpack to see if they would let me get photos. So tattoo conventions, I stop people like, I mean, I pretty much just make it up as I go along.
Right. So now, do you take artistic license with, like you just said, if I'm going to make you, like, if they're holding a whiskey glass, is there always whiskey in it, or are you putting the whiskey in there after the fact? Is it any kind of liquid and you play around with it, or do you shoot it as is?
I generally put whiskey in it, and I even will choose what kind of whiskey I want in it, because then I know. I mean, hyperrealism is hard because there's, when you make something look so realistic, if something is a little bit off, it's so much more noticeable. Like if I was skewing things or having it be surrealistic or whatever, then it wouldn't necessarily matter. But my lighting scenarios, they need to read right. Everything needs to go together. It doesn't mean that at times I don't fudge what I need to do if something doesn't look right. Like I put in, if there's like a weird patch of light that came in from behind a shot and it doesn't make sense because I changed the background, then I'm going to take that light out. But most of the times I do try to get things set up for myself in the most ideal way that all my time can go into the painting of it versus the trying to figure out how to make it look right. And
now, are you taking the photos just right with your phone, or you have like a whole setup? It's just phones.
No, just with the phone.
Wow.
And there's no post editing of the photograph.
No, I mean, the editing comes in my brain. Like
Right.
if I want light,
More contrast or
like,
something.
yeah, I mean, because I can never really get a background that like I
Right.
want to paint. I really, really like the singular focus in my work.
Right.
Like,
MK, can you pull up some, because there's a couple of things I want to ask Jackee in terms of, like, you with you bringing up composition, Jackee. I'm curious just to ask you, like, when you say your background, we've noticed, or I've noticed specifically, that your backgrounds specifically are designed to isolate the hands. So
Yeah.
it's, when you're shooting it, is the background, because you're saying you're basically working right off the photograph, is that the
Right.
actual background in the photograph?
No.
It's not.
No,
Okay.
I put in whatever the background I think should be in
Right.
there. Like usually the person is in the background. Like I've
Right.
got some very candid shots of people's faces looking confused while I'm taking photos of them. So no, it's I mean, once I figure out what I want the feel of the piece to be when it comes to lighting, do I want it to be dark or light or whatever? This guy, he was standing in Edinburgh, and he's a hairstylist across the fourth from here, and he goes by the Kilty Clipper, and just like great big white beard and wears a kilt, and I just was like in awe of him all together. So I asked him if I could buy him a beer and take photos
There
of
it
him, and
is.
he was happy to have it.
That's incredible. Now, what do you start with when you have the composition set up the way you want it? Are you diving into the focus of the hands first? Are you putting down the background first? Are you doing washes? How does that work for you?
It completely depends. I think that there's always kind of a give and take throughout the whole process anyways. Like I used to like leaving the backgrounds completely just raw wood. But then I realized I'm way too messy to keep that up. Because then, you get like one drop of acrylic on a clean
Right.
background. And I was like, well, that's over. Got to figure out how to do backgrounds now. So then I started, I really like pulling a color out of what the painting has,
Right.
and trying to incorporate that into the background more. But once you get going, and like all of a sudden the background might seem too light or too dark, and quite often it changes throughout the whole thing. You can probably even see it in some of my Instagram posts where like there is a little bit more dramatic changes from the background, because it just, there's just times where it just doesn't look right, and you need to play with it more.
Right.
So
Right. Are you sketching things out primarily first, or are you directly painting? I would think that when you're doing washes, you can't just directly paint.
no, so for the ones with the light background, I do the graph on tracing paper, and then do it backwards, and then put it on the wood and trace it on there so I can get as light an image as possible onto there, because I can't really, like, you can't erase on wood. Like it's just, and if any of your students decide to try painting on wood, they need to treat the wood.
Oh, yes.
There's stuff called GAC 100 that I use that's like glue on the wood first, and then my favorite gesso is just a clear gesso, because it has like a really nice sort of sandy texture to it, and I find that its absorption of acrylic is a lot nicer. Like I've tried it with black gesso and white gesso and whatever, and I think just the more pigmented stuff has a little bit less of the absorbency that I like to make acrylics less frustrating.
That's interesting.
So you do technically prime it, but you're doing it with a clear primer.
Yes.
Yeah. So everything that your for lack of a better term, your base layer is the wood grain color, correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So and then you start glazing. Now, are you working with your lightest values first, and then you're just increasing that value as you go because you want to be able to see through? How does that work?
Again, it totally depends. I mean,
jumping around,
yeah, it depends on what it's going to be. Like, I certainly don't start with my darkest first, because if I do, then you know, there's no going back unless I want to have a really, really opaque background, which often, I mean, it's a good enough fallback to all of a sudden just paint the background a solid thing. Oh, so that's a really interesting story if you want to know about this guy.
Absolutely. That's why we're here, Jackee. Give us as many stories as you have.
I love this one. So there's one even further back from this. It's of this same gentleman's hand. His name is John Knott. He is holding a cow's eyeball in this painting. So if you go back to that, it's pretty gross, but it's pretty. It was really fun. It was actually one of the paintings that I did first that with hands that I was like, oh, this is so much fun. I really, really geek out on texture. I absolutely love, like, I mean, that's why I love hands so much. Like like the creases and the, you know, everything we talked about before, the calluses and whatever. And the wet textures is so much fun. Like a lot of this started because I kind of just wanted to see what I'm capable of doing. It was just personal challenges to see, like, if I could make something look wet enough that you want to touch it and see if it's wet. Right. So I started doing these paintings, and this guy, John, contacts me. And then I was living in England. This is before I came up to Scotland. And he asked if he could commission me to do a painting. And he's not a taxidermist, but he's like a bone rearticulator. I don't know, what do you call those people? Like when they get a pile of bones and they put it back into the form of a skeleton. Okay. He had this person contact him that had a baby cow that had not lived long because it was so deformed when it was born. Huh. And so they sent him the body and asked him if he could get down to the skeleton so that they could have this deformed cow, baby calf skeleton. Right. No calves were actually harmed in the process. It died a natural death. Yes, as sad as it is. So I was like, well, I have to do that. I mean, how can you not do that when somebody asks you to participate in something like that? So I was like, well, I have to come and get my own reference photos. I can't have him take photos because he doesn't know my eye or what I want to see. So
no puns intended on any.
No, I know, I was going to say that too. I'm glad you said it. So then we ended up taking the train down to see him, and don't know this guy at all. He meets us at the train station in this pickup truck. And I mean, he's like fully tattooed. He kind of like looks like the type of guy that might like headbutt you in the face if you say something wrong a little bit. The nicest man, so kind. Picks us up and puts us in his truck and starts just like driving out of town. And my husband Tom and I were just like, where are we going? What are we doing? Like, this is kind of nuts. And so he like goes up to this farm where his workshop is, but his workshop is like around the back, and it's just like nothing around at all, no farmers, anything. And it's like essentially a lean-to type of shed workshop.
This sounds like a horror story, Jackee.
I know. And I was like, and it was so nice. I felt comfortable. Like if he was a serial killer, he would have been the nicest one ever. But luckily he wasn't. So then he like brings us around the back and into his area and pulls the body of this calf out of the freezer. Or well, no. I think it was on top of the freezer because he needed it to thaw. Oh, the concept for the painting was that he wanted it to be whilst he was removing the skin and fur from this thing. Right. And I'm like pretty sensitive to that type of thing anyways. I mean, I am vegan, and like
this just justifies everything you do.
It was like, but again, natural death and, you know, whatever, like, so then he, like, I brought Tom because I was like, if I, you know, pass out or need to just run away, he'll at least be there to get the pictures, because I want to do this. Like, I want to paint those textures. Like, it was just a cool idea. So then he starts like going through, this story is so gross. Are you sure this is okay?
This is fantastic.
Fine,
This is what we live for this, Jackie. This is fantastic.
Okay. It's like the messiest art project I've done, really. So, but it wasn't necessarily messy for me, luckily. But he starts to like go through and remove the skin. And it's not as gross as you might think because it was like frozen and stiff. So because it was so inanimate, it was hard to think of it as having once been alive, if that makes any sense.
Well, can I interject and just ask you, like, I'm assuming his skill at doing this is more surgical. He's not just like chopping it up, right?
Yeah, there is a method that he was
which kind of makes it a little bit more tolerable also.
Yes, and on top of it, I was looking through the screen of my phone the whole time. So I had a degree of separation. It's like watching a movie and being able to handle, you know, seeing someone punched in the face, but not really wanting to see that in person.
Right,
so Same exact thing, right? Anyway, I'm like taking pictures. I was like, oh, I can do this. I'm totally going to be fine. And he wanted more blood on his hands because like this is what he does for a living. He wanted like an action shot painting from it. But the little dead beast was too frozen. So he was just like trying to like soften it up.
Yeah, to get oh my goodness.
Blood on his hand. I know. And like the whole thing, it sounds so absurd when I say it all out loud. But it was really like all right in the moment. And then all of a sudden I was kind of into it. And I was like, you know what I really want is like, I want that eyeball in your hand. Like that was my choice to have him take the eyeball out of the skull in front of me and put it in his hand so that I could get pictures of it. Dude, I was like, I mean, I left just like, oh my God, like we have to go have a pint of beer and completely relax forever. It was such a crazy experience, but I absolutely loved it. And that painting is one of my favorite ones I've done because it was such a crazy experience.
You have a story attached to it for sure.
Yeah.
Going back to your process here, Jackie, you talked about how you transfer everything onto the panels. So are you doing full-size drawings that then get transferred? So you're doing the drawing with the grid on paper first?
Depending. If it's a dark background, I'll put it straight onto the panel.
Well, okay.
But if it's a light background, then I can't put it on the panel because, like I said, you just can't erase it. My paintings aren't enormous, so it doesn't. I was just
going to ask, generally, what scale do you work in?
I mean, it depends. Like, you know, some of them are maybe like this, and some are maybe like 50 centimeters by 40 centimeters, like 30 centimeters, like generally that small. Big paintings aren't selling super well anyways. It's kind of like a trend moving across the board, I feel like, of people going smaller.
Because they have such, at least, you know, social media wise, they have such a presence when you look at them that I automatically assumed you were doing like 2 feet by 3 feet or like 3 feet by 4 feet.
Just
because of the literal weight of seeing that painting done, right, MK? Like I see you nodding. Like, don't they come across as being these like bigger, almost like challenging in your face type pieces? I would love to see on that scale what they would do.
Yeah, I would love to paint one that large. I think it would be a lot of fun. And most people do think that they are really huge. I had told you when we first spoke last week that I got to see people see my artwork for the first time last year. Prior to that, I had never been to any shows that my art has shown at, just because it would be like overseas and didn't work out to buy a ticket to go over for a night. But anyways, when people saw my work, that was like the number one thing being said was they were surprised by the fact that they're relatively small. They're not huge paintings.
Yeah.
So,
but I would think in some ways that's even more impressive because of the amount of detail. Yeah. Right, MK? I mean, they're just so technically skilled. Like, to think you must be using like 000 size brushes.
000, and then I trim them down. You should see my ridiculous
The
brushes.
one bristle brush.
Yeah, I use like the cheapest brushes ever. I mean, like I can't. The wood panel destroys brushes anyways.
Yes, like
and
sandpaper.
I pretended that I wanted like the nice brushes for a while, but after spending a lot of money and then destroying them, I'm like, nope, back to the cheap stuff. And like all of my brushes, like that outside paint is just peeling off of them. And if I get like a 0, I'll use it as a 0 for a bit, and then once it starts getting destroyed, I just start trimming it down to be my fine 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Yeah.
It's almost like having the mind of a miniaturist. Like you must be.
Oh my God, I want to do miniatures.
I can absolutely see that, like a Joshua Smith type thing, or MK. Who's the artist that we follow? I can't. My mind's escaping me. He's the miniaturist.
Monahan.
Yes, Ryan Thomas Monahan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
I have to check that one out. I don't know.
Well, I'll have to send you. We'll tag you in something. But they're so incredibly detailed. But I could see, like, on a painting level, you having that, and even MK, who is I'm trying to think of the artist, Rod Penner.
Yeah, Rod
Penner, who lives in Texas.
I don't know that one.
Jackie, if I will send you a link for that too. He does, and they're literally like 8x10. Yeah, pull that up. 8x10 paintings that look like
they're unreal.
Like, yeah, he looked like he leaned out of his car and took a snapshot with his phone. Like they're just.
Rod.
Oh wow.
I mean, they're so incredible, and I love that he puts like MK, like, see the one with his hand with the cigar. Like he puts that in
Nice.
He puts that in there just for scale, though, just to see how small that really is.
Right. Yeah, that's incredible. I put my hand in there because so many people used to think they were photographs.
Actually, it's funny, Jackie, that you brought up the whole thing about putting your hand in the photo, because MK and I were talking about it last week after the pre-check was done. You know, MK and I stay on for like 40 minutes, and we're always like, "Oh my God, that was amazing!" and he actually brought it up. He's like, "Do you think that she puts her hand in everything as almost like a watermark, because you don't want people to rip it off of your social media, or you're putting it in there because you want people to know that it's painted?"
I want people to know that it's painted. Like, I never thought about people ripping me off on social media. I hope they don't do that.
Yeah, because I was like, as I was pulling the images for the episode in the Instagram, obviously you have a lot of works in progress, and then you have your hand in the piece. And then I went to the website, and then like the pieces that you were selling, I thought it was really interesting that the ones for sale, you put a video of the piece, which was kind of interesting too.
That's new.
Okay.
Like, I before had just photos of my artwork, and I didn't really I just wasn't comfortable with the photos, because again, like when you're looking at scale and I didn't think it was a good representation. And then in all honesty, I was a little worried about being ripped off. It doesn't rip or like right click, and you still want to put like a nice image up and whatever. Anyway, I get a email from some fine arts thing, like it seems like 7 times a day usually, that they're coming out with tips constantly just to make sure you're marketing yourself well and giving you advice, whatever. And one of them said to do video, and I was like, oh, that's a smart idea, because
I think it protects you, and I think that it also is an interesting way of showing the piece too. You know,
that's it.
You know, just from different angles, you get a better idea of scale. You see, I think when you look at a work of art, you're not always looking at it straight up. You know. But that was interesting.
Unless you're me and your face is right up against it.
Yeah, you're like smelling it, you're eating it, you're tasting it.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting that you brought that up, Jackie. That originally your hand is in there just to prove that it's not a photograph, that you're actually painting it.
Yeah. And I have to say I get a better response if my hand is in there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
People can see that, because I think it's easy to it can be easy to pass by if you don't understand that.
Because if you don't have the hand there, and people are finding it on like the discovery page or something, they may just think it's a photo of a tattooed person, and then like when they see the hand in there, then they know it's a work of art.
Right. Our buddy Alex Stewart just said in the chat, he said, videos of your work is such a brilliant idea. And so his work goes up in the forests of Vancouver. And it looks like this kind of, he's a stencil artist. So, but he incorporates his work, he wheat pastes them into the environment. So they become part of the environment, but because he makes them eco-friendly, they eventually decay along with it. So it doesn't ruin the environment.
Oh, that's awesome.
So for him to do a video makes absolutely perfect sense to show all the angles.
It was fun to do too. I mean, I had to figure out YouTube for the first time ever, and use some of their free music to put on in the background. I was like, I couldn't even figure out how to get my own music on there, but
that's funny.
Yeah.
Jackie, so now let me ask you, I know I had messaged you during the week about, and it wasn't a test. I wasn't trying to stress you out, but I had asked you for some artists that you admire or that you are influenced by. So if you can give us a name, I know MK has been stockpiling images. When it comes to just, what you look at, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone in your genre, but somebody that when you look at their work, you're like, oh my goodness, you can't get enough of it.
Well, I mean, number one, I know I'm married to the guy, but he is my favorite. Tom Strom is so talented. It kills me. What he can come up with off the cuff blows my mind all the time. And I'm very fortunate to be in a relationship with somebody who produces nonstop, and it's inspirational. So it helps me to produce and whatever.
Now, let me ask you, being married to a fellow artist, is there a lot of idea sharing and give and take, and or are you kind of like the Lee Krasner, Jackson Pollock, don't come in my studio unless I invite you kind of thing?
We started off that way probably, and more on my end of it, because I am relatively anxious, and I don't like people looking over my shoulder. Attention to my work is still a novelty to me. I just feel like a regular old Joe that just happens to have fallen on something that's that people like, fortunately. So when I first started and he was right there, I was like, oh no, this is not gonna work for me. So I had a separate space. But this is, we've been together 20 years. So now we work together in the same space all the time. And as you can see from that, he works very, very differently from me.
Yes.
All those ones on the yellow wall are mostly acrylics too.
Wow.
And I don't even understand what is going on in his head most of the time. There's so often that he comes up with something and I'm like, I should be disturbed by it, but I'm not. So again, he's just a huge influence and inspiration for me. But when it comes to the types of work that I really like admiring and just keeping me, it usually comes down to keeping me inspired to keep going and striving for just pushing myself to, not necessarily to refine what I'm doing, but to figure out different avenues I can take it into as well, because it can't last forever the exact way that I'm going. And I need the influence of other imaginative people to see what the possibilities could even be if I venture out. That I'm going to say his name wrong, but that Dennis
Sarrazin?
I
think that's how you say it. Yes.
His work just knocks my socks off. The tones that he uses, the way that he sees, it's gorgeous. Yeah. And the roughness of everything, and how I've never been able to see one in person, of course. So I'm only looking at him in screens this big, but he gets across so much in what appears to be so little, if that makes sense when it comes to details. I mean, just look at that, and the exaggeration of the tones and the movements, everything about it is.
And what I find very similar to yours is the, for lack of a better term, the simplified background that draws your attention into that subject area.
Sure. Yeah. And who knows, that might be part of my attraction to
Right. I mean, and then,
the
and
work
his,
too.
yeah, like, I mean, I could see that one right there. Stop with the hands there. And okay, like,
This one?
I mean, that's, yeah, I could see your immediate attraction to a piece like that, Jackee, because it's similar but different than what you're doing. The subject matter is very similar, but the approach is completely different than what you're doing. He's got this
Right.
kind of illustrative / painterly approach, as opposed to that, you know, layering, methodical, technical, you know, slow, you know, like you said, a bazillion layers.
Right.
Yeah.
Like he's got that more direct painting kind of look to his work, which is, I think, as artists, I think we gravitate towards the opposite styles more often. I think it either comes from a place of intrigue, you know, as if, I know for myself personally, when I'm painting, I gravitate towards things that I know I can't do very well, because I want to see what I can pull from that
Right.
and put in my own practice. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. Like I love being in awe of other people's brains. Like when they
Yeah.
can come up with something where I'm just like, I don't understand how you come up with this. Like
right.
it is, I always wish I was more imaginative than I am. Not that I mean, I have an imagination. It just is not like as
It doesn't translate to your hands as easily when
it
you got to
doesn't.
put it down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Like I'm still, I guess, teaching myself to
Right.
translate it from here to here.
Which is a great message for our kids to hear too, is that, you know, you're never done learning a craft.
Oh no. Yeah, that's it for sure. I mean, like every day I'm figuring something new out for,
Right.
and my style is constantly changing, and you know, like the things, I mean, you can't reach a point where you're like, oh, that's it. That,
Right.
you know, because that point, and like even with just like trends in life, it's gonna be over, and
Right.
you're gonna have to be able to move on. And if you stuck yourself in a little bubble, you're not going to be able to move on with it or from
Right.
it, you know.
Right. And I think it's
Which,
even more important as you know, because essentially you are as a narrative painter, you're a communicator, and you have stories that you want to tell, and you don't want
right.
you don't want that story to be the same book every single time you pick it up, because how many times can you read that same story over and over again and feel like you're getting something out of it?
Yeah, that's it. And like, I think the people that like my work could probably be happy seeing it for a lot longer than I would be happy doing it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah,
I
well,
really enjoy it, like, but I know at some point I will have to like move on to something else that I find to be a new challenge, because that's kind of what this is all about. It's just,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I could relate to like a musician who, like, let's say the Rolling Stones. Like, you know, Mick Jagger goes up there and somebody's yelling for him to sing something from 1973. How many times can you possibly keep singing that song and enjoy singing it?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, can I try singing something new, or can I try painting something new? Like, you don't want to get pigeonholed and stagnant doing the same stuff. And I think that's admirable to hear you admit that and say, I don't want to be stuck doing the same thing, even though I've proven that I can knock it out of the park the way I'm doing it. I would rather take the risk and fail at something newer.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, no matter what, it will probably be a fail, because, and I'm prepared for it. I mean, if you do the same music analogy, like when, you know, Mike Patton first went out and did Tomahawk, and I was just like, no, I'm sorry, but that's not Faith No More. You know, like it sounded too close but too different, and like, and then all of a sudden it took time to love them. Like it's going to be the same thing once I start painting something new, which, you know, it's been ready for me to try something new for a while now. But yeah, when it happens, I'm prepared to see, like, you know, in social media speak, those likes are going to go down. People are
Yeah.
going to be like, this is not why I'm following you.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but the fact that you're not a slave to that is admirable too. Like you're not doing it just for the quote unquote likes. You're
Yeah, well, and I mean the attention to it doesn't translate into sales by any
Right.
means. Like
Right.
ultimately the attention doesn't matter that much. You know, I mean, people trend and whatever. Like I'm happy with the attention I get. Don't get me wrong. Like it's very flattering that as many people like my work as they do. But it's also it's not entirely a real world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
even explain that? Like,
Yeah.
I'm,
It's true.
yeah. But at the same time, it's also the only way that people can see my work without it being in one place with it, you know, because I'm not going to have it at like a gallery that everybody can get to.
Right. Right.
And
That's an important, you know, it's a blessing and a curse. You take the good with the bad and
Exactly.
Yeah.
you make it work. You make it work for you. As an artist, you have to make that work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately it's very, very good. It's a good thing to have. But
Right,
yeah, I
right.
just
Well,
keep
that's
the
how we get.
expectations
That's how
real.
we get the chance to talk to a Jackee Sandelands-Strom. That's the only
Yeah.
way we would be able to do something like this. And MK and I talk about that all the time. If we were in high school and we had the opportunity to hear directly from an artist that we had been following or studying, or back then it would be like who I saw in a book or who I saw in a gallery show or something like that. But to have the experience of a real-time discussion is even just for him and I now. Like all last night I was rolling around like with excitement because I was going to be talking to Jackee Sandelands-Strom this afternoon. It's just like been a great experience for us to get to have those connections and talk art and things that we love to talk about, and it's just been great.
Oh, it's such a great idea for your students too. Like I can't imagine what this would have been like for me when I was in high school. Like, yeah, I mean, what an amazing thing for them.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a great experience talking with you, and your process is just breaking it down for us is just been what a great experience. Everybody, hopefully we're gonna see people in a couple of weeks coming back to school. We're gonna try and be safe about things and keep our fingers crossed that we can get through a full year with everybody intact and nobody getting sick or
nobody dying.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, the process is kind of like an experiment right now, so my fingers and toes are all crossed because it's going to be a lot. Even getting back, MK is going to look a lot different than what we're used to. But we're going to have to make it.
Everything's so nuts right now. Like when you go back, they're going to expect nuts, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody's on a learning curve. Like the whole world is just different.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And we'll get through it just like we always do, and we'll lean on each other and we'll figure things out. We're going to try and give everybody the best experience that they could possibly have. But in the meantime, until then, everybody, like we always say every episode, be kind to one another, look out for one another, love one another. We will talk to everybody soon. It's been another great ride here on The Drop, and we will see each of you again in the next couple of weeks. Thanks for stopping by. Thank you, Jackee.
Thank you,
Alex
Jackee.
and Miguel, thanks for sitting in.
Thank you.
We will see everybody
You
soon.
guys be safe.
You too. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.